Hi, my name is Stefanie. I will talk about feminist hackerspaces as one way to respond to the fact that there is just a very small percentage of female-identified people in the open hardware scene. And first of all, I would like to show you a small video about our feminist hackerspace here in Vienna.
So I liked that, and thanks.
Feedback. Maybe it lost the serial connection. Maybe with the flash going off. Yeah. From there, like a carnival.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was Ms. Baltazar's laboratory, our feminist hackerspace in Vienna. And because I did that since 2009 already, I was trying to understand what's going on. Why is it such a different dynamic if we provide these spaces, and why does it have such a strange reaction towards other people? And so I wrote my PhD about feminist hackerspaces because I had so many questions. It's weird, yeah, because you think that open hardware, open source software is a place where people can contribute into something that they really believe in and that makes sense for them, and that actually everyone can participate. But if you look at proprietary software, for example, there's 28% women in there who are developers, but in open source it's just 1.5, and in open hardware it's even worse, unfortunately. Even in things that are for editors, right? Something actually female connotated like writing, Wikipedia, it's 1% transsexual or transgender persons and only 9% female identified people. So I was asking myself, why are there actually not more people doing stuff from a female perspective? What's going on here? Why are there not more programmers and female hackers and female artists? So the way to find out more about it that we chose was either, on the one hand, to do interviews with a lot of old ladies who have been hackers since they're since the 70s, 60s, and we also did a lot of workshops in our own feminist hackerspace, and then we also tried to read a lot of theories and to find out how that informs practice. And I think one of the most interesting theories for us to understand what's going on was Judith Butler, who basically says that gender is not something that you're born with, but something that you learn, that you can perform. It's like a performance in a theater play. You kind of learn gestures, you learn things, how to wear things and how to behave. And the way you learn things is through your family or your context, your social context, and that's something that you can actually also influence. Yeah, you can influence with whom you hang out, or how you choose your community, or how you choose and construct your networks. So that gives you back a little bit of agency. If you think of gender something that is just natural born and you cannot do anything against it, and you feel kind of helpless. But with Judith Butler's view on gender, something you can learn and you can influence through your circumstances and your context, gives you back a little bit of agency. And then there's Bruno Latour, maybe you know him. He said kind of that not only people have networks, but also people and machines have networks. Machines and devices can influence how you behave, and for example, a simple example that he gave is if you have a hotel key with a big keychain on it, then you will not forget to bring it back to the hotel reception. So this keychain, this key thing made you do something. So this way, people in a network are agents that are influenced by machines, and machines influence people. And then there's Henry Lefebvre. He was writing a lot about space. That space is not just a physical thing, but it can be like a meaningful place. It can symbolize some principles for you. It can symbolize values for you, or ethics. And of course, it also kind of documents shared ethics. So based on these three people, we kind of try to expand our thinking on hackerspaces. I'm sure you all know what a hackerspace is. It's basically a living room for people to hang out and build the stuff they want to do and they're excited about. Usually they use the beautiful tools that you see out there, CNCs, 3D printers, laser cutters, everything that's fun to play with. Usually also smells really good in these spaces because of the wood that's burned from the laser cutter. But the thing is that if you go in one, usually it's only 2%, 4% women, or people who think of themselves as women. And the root of hackerspaces is in a kind of rebel climate. It was in the 60s and 70s in a kind of counterculture movement, and the basis, the way that this infrastructure organizes itself, as you might all know, is ectocracy. So people can do things and they get encouraged to participate, and it's not you have to wait until some other authority gives you the permission to do something. And it's also very important that there are educational events like this, for example, in Hackerspace, that there are lectures, that there are workshops, and there are like skill sharing events, show and tell stuff. And as you all know, it has spread amazingly, and it has been really, really big movement, and it has also been commercialized, of course. There are many different forms of hackerspaces now. Some are called makerspaces, hackspaces, fab labs. In the end, they are still all really male-centered, and although most of the stuff that comes out there, as I said before, is really open about open source and open hardware, and you would think that it's really unbelievable how fertile these spaces are. They're still somehow kind of very exclusive, and they're excluding people who don't perform a certain gender. And I was trying to find out why. And Judith Butler again says that we can only find out about who we are by having a certain communication all the time with either our partner or people who are friends or people who are around us are really honestly asking us, who are you? Why are you doing this? And then us really trying to figure out, why am I doing this? Why am I this way? How can I kind of explain to others and myself how I behave? And she calls this process self-crafting. So in a community where people negotiate norms all the time, the process of self-crafting is very powerful. And okay, there's another theorist, but I will not mention that now because it's not enough time. But anyway, in hackerspaces, the norm is usually, that's negotiated through the hackerspace ethics, that doing technology stuff makes you somehow more respected. If you have more ability or skill in technology, usually people will admire you more in a hackerspace. And interesting enough, that's different if your gender is female, because usually if you perform technology in a hackerspace, this will be interpreted as trying to be masculine or performance of masculinity. And following Judith Butler's theory, being really good at soldering, programming, and being a real geek, and being like really good at network administration makes you a little bit is a form of performing masculinity and showing that you're male. So actually hackerspaces are like places that produce masculinity in a way, because the way people perform and practice their technology skills is a way to also show that they belong to a certain gender. So of course, if person come in who usually perform female gender, that will contradict each other, because making technology is in Europe or US a way to perform masculinity. So if you perform femininity and at the same time do soldering, people will be really confused, and their way of thinking about gender and norms will be somehow twisted. So sometimes these tools that are also, by the way, pretty phallocentric, they become kind of tools to play and inscenate your masculinity. So what can we do against this kind of very exclusive way of performing gender? There are 3 different things I would like to show you that I think that are relevant. I think they all don't work, these 3 things, but at least it was really nice reactions to what's this problem. One is pink hardware. There's, for example, the Sakura board or Lilybad that tried to make something that looks very female and feminine and girlish in order to bring women into this field that's actually masculine, right? And the performance of masculinity, but make it so much according to the norms of what female is, that it could again make people come into the field who are female identified. So this Sakura board, Sakura means cherry blossom in Japan, because women love obviously cherry blossoms. And also Lilipad is round, and it's made for textiles, because women obviously love to do textiles. And actually, I think it works to some degree, because we're really early in childhood coded that girls wear pink and boys wear blue, so if something is suddenly pink, it's like, oh, well, maybe that's for me. But the problem is that in workshops that I gave, people actually thought that the pink one is easier to learn. So no matter if it was female identified or male identified, if I showed them the pink and the blue one, they would go for the pink one, because that's for girls, so it must be easy, right? But I mean, by the way, the Sakura board is actually harder to learn, because you have to upload the code differently. And also it's more powerful, actually. But the moment people saw blue, they thought, oh, this must be advanced. So that's also something that comes with this norm of masculinity, that must be like for experts, and the thing that's more female-looking, that must be for girls. So another strategy that's not the pink hardware is separatism, to just have your own space. That's what I showed you before with our feminist hackerspace, to just have your own room, a safer space where people can just try out things and not be afraid that someone will come and laugh about them. And there are quite a couple now. Spreading, actually also in Indonesia, there's one. One of them is in the US, Double Union, in San Francisco. And there's Seattle Attic, although I think they're closing down now. Then there's Flux. And what they all have in common, these feminist hackerspaces, is that they usually have a code of conduct on the website where they already share their principles and on shared ethics, what they would like people to know before they enter the space. It's kind of door policies. There are also a lot of them who are actually a little bit more industrial focused or private industry focused, like in Kenya, Akira chicks, or girls in ICT, or girls who code. They try to get women into this field also to have more employees in the technology field, not so much to empower them with technology. Rays on Girls, Ice Cairo, Take Back the Tech in Africa, South Africa. So they all kind of try to give an environment where female-identified people can feel more relaxed learning from each other. And then there's Hacker Moms, that's also in California. It's a place where the babies can also learn how to hack while the moms can hack. So I think that's a really helpful idea because usually you don't have a babysitter. At least in Austria, it's really expensive to have a babysitter. Hacker Moms was thinking about this issue, and they prepared like a hackerspace where the children can also be amused and entertained while the mothers continue to hack like they used to. And then the third strategy I would like to talk about is the ones that people used before the other two strategies were invented, which is just struggle on your own. So there were two old ladies I interviewed. One is called Carly Schneemann, and other one Lillian Schwartz. And Carly Schneemann, she just found objects and motors on the street, and she made her own kinetic objects already in the 60s. And then she was invited by Bell Labs to work with Bell Labs engineers, and she developed actually one of the first interactive, very Vietnam critical installations. She made seats that if people were getting nervous and going up and down on their seat, the film would stop. Showing war crimes in Vietnam, and if they were really quiet, it would continue more fast. And then she became more radical, and she did a lot of really body-focused performances. Like, for example, she's putting out here a female feminist manifesto out of her vagina. So she did a lot of things about female sexuality later. But at the beginning, she was really on her own, basically inventing interactive art for herself. And Lillian Schwartz, she learned how to use electronics because she grew up on a farm where people and her brothers, they always repaired everything by themselves. So she was really good with electronics. And then when she had to work for the Navy in the war, Second World War, she just punched random cards and checked how the computer would change the graphics. And she was later one of the first people to develop like a graphic analysis software. And she found out that Leonardo da Vinci was actually drawing himself when he was drawing the Mona Lisa. Okay, so she was really on her own doing her own thing. That was her strategy. So all these three strategies are not so cool in the end, because the pink hardware just makes people think that pink hardware is easy, and feminist hackerspaces are kind of building a ghetto for women, which is also not so ideal. And then the third variation of struggling on your own is just really very exhausting, right? I mean, they both were, I mean, they're still alive, but I think it was really hard to go all up by yourself. So I was really frustrated about the whole situation in Austria because it seemed so endless, yeah, these discussions about why does gender really exist, blah, blah. So I went to Indonesia, and in Indonesia, the talk before me, the speaker before me mentioned, Andreas, that the space, the neighborhood is really important for the community, so people really help each other a lot in the neighborhood, and they exchange kind of services to each other, and they have close relationships. And it's not so important which religion you have or which background you have, but it's rather important that you live in that 10 houses radius. And that gave me the idea, not me, I mean, other people wrote about that, the space-based society, that not your identity or certain aspects of your personality or certain aspects of your background decide if you belong to a group or not, but actually that you're in the space, that you are just there, that you're close, that gives you the permission to be part. So actually, Andreas is really from Sumatra, he knows much better. But when I went to Sumatra, I met people who call themselves Minangkabau, and it's a quite old culture, and they have three really practical kind of tools to keep up their communities and neighborhoods. One is they have a mamak, mama, and that's the brother of the mother of a child. So it's basically the uncle, and he is raising the children with the mother and the father. So every child has 3 parents. And this way, every family is connected to the next, yeah, right? Because you are maybe, as a man, yeah, you're a father to your child, but you're also the mama to your sister's child. And the other way around, if you're, for example, homosexual, you can still have children because you're the mama of the sister's children. So this gives multiple authorships to the child. And another technique that they use is adoption. So if someone comes new because of a refugee, for example, then they get adopted by one family and they get introduced to all the unwritten laws of the neighborhood and unwritten rules. So they get a kind of mentorship. And the third thing that I found really helpful that they use is that everyone has to always leave the neighborhood and has to leave the country. It's called Merantau. So it's 2 years that you are abroad and try to make a living or just learn something outside of your usual context. I think that's also very important because sometimes in hackerspaces there are people who have been there forever, and that's how they got a lot of authority in the space. So conclusion. Sorry, all of this is German and English. So if the way that we craft ourselves is not stable, if we're always adapting to norms, if we're always adapting to communities or friends or lovers, if we're always in a flow as people, then what can make a group actually stable? And I think that something that can make it stable is that you negotiate principles and norms and ethic together, and together maybe find a space that represents you as a group and find a space that hosts your activities as a group. Our own hackerspace has now at the moment no space, and I really see how it totally changes the dynamics in the group. So I really believe that if everything is fluent, and I believe it's fluent, it should be fluent if we want to be free in a democracy, then the space is really important to ground your group. And yeah, I think in Indonesia it's working pretty well that people really use the space as a common, smallest denominator to keep people together. So just to explain this concept of multiple authorships or multiple parents again. So it's always the brother of the mother and the father, and they have a child, and then the father again is the brother of the sister of the husband who have a child, and the sister's husband again is married and has a brother. So all the children have like a backup parent. And so projects, I think, in a hackerspace also have to have many people who care about them. Yeah, and I think if there's this system of care, this infrastructure of care, then people will feel safe in the space and will allow themselves to explore and take risks. That's at least what I experienced. Yeah, and that's the new feminist hacker ethic I came up with after all these paths. So if people are here, then they have to be dealt with as participants. And actually, in the situation in Austria at the moment, when there are so many refugees from Syria, I think we really have to also be aware when they're here, they have to actually be allowed to vote and have to be allowed to be part of the society. And then it's really important to have common rituals like hackathons or workshops. I think it's really important to, in kind of rituals, perform together that it's a group. Eating together or singing together, whatever, using the CNC together. And then I think there should be platforms that are there for self-forming, that allow to discuss and debate. And if you lose a space, like our hackerspace lost the actual physical space, then I think it's important to stabilize on other levels of the community, like stabilize the practice, or stabilize certain symbols that keep you still together. Yeah, so I think that's really a way that you can become resilient even in a totally crazy, mobilized and self-employed economy, and take care of each other. Yeah, so, I mean, there's LifePatch and there's Honf, and there are a lot of other groups in Indonesia where I think it's working really well. In Surabaya, there's also Hacker Collective or Citizen Lab that's doing amazing stuff. So this is actually happening, it's not just that I made this up. And here are some photos of workshops we did as Ms. Baltazar's laboratory. That was, for example, in Damascus before all this craziness happened. In Damascus, there were so many female informatics students because it was encouraged in the society. It was the norm that women program. It was a female thing to program. So when we did the workshop there, we found really, really great participants. Problem was that some parts that are open source, they were not able to be downloaded there because they were still provided by American companies who were giving a boycott towards the Syrian government. And also there was a really unstable internet. Am I talking too long? How much time? Okay. So it was totally hard to get the Arduinos to work there because people had really no internet, and then the computers they used did not have Linux on it, but they had some really bad cracks of Windows. So there were so many constraints. But in the end, we had a really, really beautiful exhibition together of all the stuff that showed up. Unfortunately, now they're all in all different places of the world. Like, yeah, she's now in Lebanon, and she's in France and Sweden. They're all over the world now. That was in New York. In New York, we had a lot of participants who were really high academic and faculty, and so it was a completely different kind of group. And this was in Taipei. There's a hackerspace. It's also very beautiful there. And that was in Copenhagen. And this was in Indonesia. Actually, after this workshop, they founded a kind of feminist hacker collective called XX Lab, and they won the Ars Electronica Prize last year for digital communities. So it was over 40 international workshops in the end. And it was fun, so I hope we can continue. And that's actually the end of my talk. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Stefanie. Are there any questions from the audience? Yes.
Yeah, Leopold, I'm the founder of the Open Land Lab, which is a hackerspace on the countryside. We know each other, I think. I find it pretty boring that most of the time I'm in communities which are totally male-dominant. So I have to think about your new feminist hacker ethics. But I can make the offer if you want to make anything on the countryside, if it is not pink hardware, you can do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is I want to make a call because I want to publish the book Open Hardware Now, which is a follow-on of the book Open Design Now. And of course it will be under Creative Commons, and it will be totally open, and it will be with multiple authorship. So if anybody is interested, tomorrow we will have a brunch on the last day and discuss about open hardware.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, maybe it's in a village, right? So maybe that actually could happen that you have this space-based community there. But you need a car, I guess that's a constraint. Yeah, I don't have a car. Yeah, that's a problem.
But you can do things there which you can't do in the city.
Yeah.
Hi, Stefanie. I'm also sort of, as just said, appalled about how all of the fields that we work in, like in arts and technology and media art education, it is largely dominated by men. And I was asking, what kind of strategies do you think that can be done within these fields to sort of change this?
Yeah, I think mentorship, yeah, then adaptation, that if someone new comes in, they need someone who really takes care of the person to feel comfortable in the community and really have some person to relate to in the group. I mean, there's this theory of cloning or mirroring, that if there's a group and you see one person in there that is a little bit like you, that you will feel like there is an entry point, you can be part of the community. But if you see them and they all look different, or in some way you cannot identify with anyone, then you will not even try. So usually it's good to have, maybe if you want to have, for example, more female participants, to have them in leading positions, maybe like the Open Hardware Association does that. And also, I think, yeah, it helps to be aware of our gender performance, that maybe if you behave in a certain way or raise your voice or ask, for example, now we see also it's much more men asking questions. Of course, I love getting questions, but if I have a workshop that's mixed, then I will, of course, spend much more time answering the questions, and the questions come from guys, and then the women don't get the time. They don't even ask questions, and because they think their question would be stupid. So, if you are aware, as someone who usually asks a lot of questions, that you do that, then you can maybe step back and encourage someone else. Yeah, I mean, just this awareness that you are performing masculinity, that already helps. And I think that women can also perform masculinity and be dominating. So I think if we're all a little bit more caring and aware of what we do, and that it's not us, that it's not natural, but that it's something we learn, that can help a lot, I think.
So I'm going to be a man and ask a stupid question. I'm going to play to type. So a lot of times when I talk to people about open source hardware, I actually tell them that one of the things I really like about open source hardware as a technical thing is that for me, it's a world that's like full of women. You know, my version of open source hardware, the Open Source Hardware Association, is founded by women. The women who are on the board are the ones who do almost all, you know, are the drivers of it. The Open Hardware Summit is founded by women and is put on by women, and those women I know do a lot of work to make it a kind of welcoming community for women. And so it was actually kind of surprising to hear, and I spend much more time in that community than in the hackerspace community per se. And so this was actually very surprising because in my mind, this is actually a very sort of like a very kind of like women-driven space. And so I guess my first question is, am I just stupid and wrong and like sitting in the wrong place to be seeing it? But my follow-up question is, if the open hardware part of this world is driven by like many leading women, what can be done to help that ethos move into the hackerspace world? If that's a question that even makes sense, like even if those spaces are even separate, because there's so many women driving open source hardware. It's strange to me that there's that gap, and so I wonder like what can be done to not just generally make the hackerspaces more accessible to women, but also tap in to the women in leadership in open source hardware.
So first of all, I think, yes, you live in New York City, right? So if you go to Baltimore or Detroit or other cities or Vienna, you won't find the same setup. Plus, I think that women often take over these social organizing skills. Like, okay, I will organize a conference because I'm so good at communicating. I was told as a child, you know, I can listen so well to people, so I will take the interviews. Yeah? They don't say, okay, I have to solder the boards or I don't have time to organize your community. I think that women tend to take over the community building skills because that's female connotated. I think, yes, like Ada Fruits, that's really a woman who actually built the hardware, and she's really behind the business, but that's so rare. Actually, I don't even know one other woman who is producing hardware in that level. So I think if you want to encourage women to actually do the development of hardware, you have to give settings where that can happen. And I mean, that has to be universities or like workshops or hackerspaces that give the equipment, the tool, the knowledge, and also the knowledge transfer opportunities. So women are really in the development and really hacking and not doing the, oh, we are all a community. Although that's important too, but I mean, I think that many women are in that organizing role because they feel more safe in that rather than in the soldering and program, like, I don't know, hacking role. I mean, they do that, but they're not visible as that. They're visible as people who organize the community, like mother. Really. Did that answer your question or not really? Yeah. I mean, I think that the Open Hardware Association does a lot of things really great. One of them, for example, you do a blind review, right, for the Open Hardware Summit in the US. I think that's really great that people don't know who is the person of the submission, because then, of course, it's a more fair way to choose speakers. And then you have also the other fellowship, right, that allows women to take part, because many times women have a lot of care work to do the housework, and they do the care for the sick grandmother or sick child or whatever. So many women just don't have time to do volunteer open hardware stuff. Yeah.